Earlier this year, when I was building my retro disc copying station, I swapped out this mainboard for another one which didn't have a rundown battery. But apart from the battery to fix, I have here another two PCI graphics cards that I need to test quickly. Then there's these two 80 style power supplies, which I also have no idea if they're still any good. And maybe I can do something about that noisy CPU fan as well as giving it a shot with that original Pentium 75 MHz CPU. It's gonna be a lot of fun today. Let's start by wiring up the power supply to the mainboard. On later generation power supplies and mainboards, the classic 80 style power connectors are key coded, so you can't easily insert them the wrong way round. But if you're unsure, you can always remember the 4 black wires meeting at the center orientation exactly like this. I'll then wire up the keyboard, a speaker and plug in the first VGA graphics card. With this minimum configuration, let's see if the power supply turns on. Yes, one single beep, no fuse blown, and it were all good if it weren't for that noisy CPU fan. As we can see here, this board features 32 MB of RAM and a 166 MHz CPU, and it comes up just fine. I then swapped out the VGA graphics card before turning over to the CPU. The CPU fan has this simple clip-on mechanism, so it's easy to remove, especially as there is currently no thermal paste underneath the heatsink. The CPU sits in a SIF socket, so it's easy to remove as well. I'm really curious to see if that 75 MHz CPU is still any good. This mainboard is the Asus P54C, which has a Type 7 socket, which is good for accommodating 70 to 200 MHz P54C CPUs, and later generations P55C MMX, and some AMD K5 and K6 CPUs with up to 233 MHz clocks. The original but flawed P5 CPUs with 60 and 66 MHz won't fit this board, as the original P5 required a socket 4. This mainboard does feature dual memory sockets to accommodate for either standard 72-pin PS2 style SIMs, but also the newer 168-pin SD-RAM DIMMs. You could use either, but not both styles at the same time. In addition to that, there is this socket here, which can accommodate the special second level cache expansion module to provide either 256 KB or 512 KB of cache memory for the CPU. As another specialty, we'll find this special PCI socket, which features another connector just behind. This is for the so-called Revision 2 Media Bus, a proprietary extension established by Asus. It seems to be a combination of PCI and ISA, specifically made to overcome some compatibility issues between the two technologies. While it was short-lived and eventually surpassed by other technologies, Asus offered a bunch of expansion cards specifically for the media bus. This was mostly audio and video 2-in-1 combo cards, but also some SCSI bus controllers. I've actually never seen any of these in the wild, but I'll keep watching out. Maybe I cross by one of these one day. But way more important right now is to set the jumpers correctly for the newly installed 75 MHz Pentium CPU. The manual gives straight instructions, which in this case is to set the bus clock to 50 MHz and the clock multiplier to 1.5 to match up this CPU. As you can see here, we're in the mid-90s and still configuring the CPU using jumpers. It would still take a few years for auto-configuring mainboards to arrive, where you could actually configure these settings entirely from within the BIOS or the EFI firmware. Less to say, the present-day modern mainboards detect this automatically anyway. Awesome! Both the second graphics adapter and the P75 work. Before I turn over to the CMOS battery, let's look into that second power supply and whether I can also do something about this CPU fan. As I don't have a proper switch for the second power supply, I need to remove the one that was wired up to the one I used before. There's some heat shrink wrapped around the connectors that I need to remove in order to get access to the plugs. Here you see the original wiring, which in this case is pairs of black and brown and white and blue each. For the second power supply, the wiring has different colors. There's a diagram on the power supply, and it's important to match up the pairs properly, which in this case is white and brown and blue and black. And it's as important to get it right as printed on the power supply instruction diagram, as the wiring must match up the pinouts for the in connectors and the out connectors, so it cuts off the power correctly. As for the CPU fan, I do hope the ball bearings are still okay and it's just a matter of adding some oil. I use a toothstick to add some drops and... oh yes, that's definitely a lot better now, and obviously I did good on the power switch wiring as well. And now for the RTC. This is an Odin 12B887A, which is actually pin compatible to the very common Dallas RTC chips. This is a soldered-on package which can't be opened, hence the coin cell living inside the case can't easily be replaced. Now, there's several options here, like desoldering the RTC chip and soldering a new one in, even with a wide IC socket if you like. But this is going to be a standby board I'll use mainly for testing, so I want to actually try if I can actually just drill open the body and wire up an external battery to it. There's not much to lose here, as I can always go the proper swap out procedure otherwise. I'll start by gently removing layer by layer from the top with a Dremel. Now, why to drill it open is simple. The positive and negative leads for the battery are not exposed to the outside pins of the package. So the only way to get hold of it is to drill it open. Originally, I had intended to open the top cover, but it seems like this chip is all one solid block. From my online research, I've seen any such which eventually reveal a solid metal lid which can be lifted up, but that seems not to be the case here. But at least I could get access to the conductors, where the one on the top is the one for the positive lead, and the one to the right is for the negative lead. And you see this hole here, which I intentionally created to cut the conductor from the positive lead and the battery. This is important, as otherwise the dead battery would kill off the newly connected battery later on. I'll then attach some wires for the positive and negative leads and add a header to it. I'll then use a 2-component plastics compound to fill the gaps again. It won't look like new, but it's good enough. I'll add a sticker to denote the polarity before wiring up the external battery. And what does the CMOS RAM think once configured and left unpowered for a while? It seems like it likes my small mod with the new battery. No more complaining on lost CMOS configuration data. Alright, I ran through everything. Not only do the 2 power supplies work, but also does this Pentium 75 MHz CPU that I salvaged at an earlier occasion. And even the mainboard was okay and took just some work on the battery. Of course, that's not a good repair in that sense. I simply wanted to try if I can make it. And apparently it's possible, and for this mainboard, which will be used mostly as a standby unit for testing purposes, that's totally okay. Maybe I should think now about building a lab mounting rig. What do you think? Anyways, I'm the Vintage Collector, and this was my short Advent time story for today. Thanks for watching, and see you again tomorrow. If you check out this channel's community tab, you'll find some polls on potential upcoming videos. You're very welcome to upvote on upcoming topics or drop in new ones you'd like me to chase down.